What is your overall assessment of the latest budget, sir? And do you think it addresses the economic challenges faced right now?
Well, to answer your question, we should know what are the economic challenges. Am I right?
Right.
To begin with, what are the economic challenges? Well, this has been evident even in the latest verdict. The Center for Study of Developing Society, Lokniti, pre-poll and post-poll studies have revealed it. And there is a widespread agreement across the country that the jobs and inflation were the two critical issues that define the underwhelming verdict in favor of the NDA. Well, the BJP has won, but it has won with a lesser margin. So the critical factor for that was people said, thank you for the Ram temple, but where are our jobs? Right. So they are happy with the temple, but they are not happy with the jobs. So that's the reason BJP lost in Ayodhya, BJP lost in Badrinath in the recent assembly elections. So BJP lost in the land of Ram temple in Uttar Pradesh. So the government seems to have learned at least some lesson from this kind of a verdict. So jobs, inflation, third aspect was inequalities. So there is, if you look at the country, we find preposterous levels of inequality, grotesque levels of inequality, absolutely unacceptable. I'll only just quote one figure by Dattatreya Hosbole, the RSS spokesperson. Well, nobody can accuse him of being left or being critical of the government. So Dattatreya Hosbole said there are 23 crore Indians who earn just 375 rupees per day and less, whereas the daily income of Adani is around 1600 crores. Well, Adani figure he did not give it, he gave the other figure. I am adding the Adani figure to it. So, well, this is the level of rampant inequalities that exist in our country. So that's the third challenge. The fourth challenge is the growth is subdued. Even the economic survey talks about only 6.5 to 7% of GDP growth rate. Even that figure is also not realistic because the government has calculated the GDP in a very interesting manner. So the nominal GDP is 10.5%. So they have deducted only the core inflation of 3% to arrive at 7% GDP. But the food inflation is over 9%. So it's erroneous to assume GDP based on the core inflation because it is the food inflation that impacts the large sections of Indian population. But notwithstanding the GDP gimmickry, the point I am trying to make was the 6.5 to 7% GDP growth rate projected in this budget and economic survey is less than the 8% India has achieved last year. The annual average growth rate in the 10 years of Modi regime is around 5.8%, whereas in the UPA decade, the 2004 to 14, which is characterized by series of scandals, as all of us know, and characterized by the policy paralysis, still the annual growth rate was 7.8%. Well, somebody may say there was pandemic in this decade. It's true, it is a there was pandemic in this, but there was global financial crisis in 2008 in the previous decade, and oil shock was there. The oil prices were hovering around $140 per barrel around 2012, 2013, whereas the oil prices were substantially lower than even $100 mark. They did not reach in this 10 years. So there are similarities, there are dissimilarities, but the fact remains the growth is certainly not encouraging. Well, we can't compare with other countries, we have to compare with our own country. So why the growth is less? Because the private investment is not forthcoming. Even the budget acknowledges this, economic survey acknowledges this. The economic survey prepared by the chief economic advisor to the government of India, presented to the parliament by the finance minister, Sitharaman, says the corporates are swimming in profit. They use the word swimming. The corporates are swimming in profit, but they are creating productive jobs. So these are the four. The private consumption expenditure is less. Private investment is not forthcoming. So the investment ratio was around 31% only. The gross fixed capital formation is still stagnant. So there is the four problems of jobs, inflation, inequalities, and declining private consumption. These are the four problems which the Indian economy is significantly facing today. Well, did the budget, your question then comes is, did the budget address them?
Right.
Well, it's a very long analysis you have to make, but I will only give you in one or two sentences. So what is the solution to all these four problems? Well, there can be individual specific solutions to each one of them, but the overall problem, the macroeconomic solution to these problems is certainly expanding the economic activity. How do you expand economic activity at a time when the private investment is not forthcoming? The only way is to increase the public expenditure and public investment, because it is an established economic theory that the public expenditure will be followed by the private investment. But did the public expenditure increase? So the government revenues expanded by 14.5%. So government was getting more money through direct taxes, through GST. GST is breaking all the records. Government was getting more money. They got 14.5% more revenues compared to the previous year. But the overall expenditure of the government rose by only 5.94%, less than what the revenue has increased. But where did this money go? Obviously, you'll have a question. Where did this money go? This money has gone to reduce the fiscal deficit. So the government still suffers from the fiscal conservatism at a time when the economic challenges which I have explained require a fiscal expansionary strategy. Unfortunately, the government seemed to have not learned the proper lesson. So as a result of lower expenditure, not so higher expenditure, what has actually happened? I'll give you a couple of examples.
Sure.
The allocation for education, health, rural development remained stagnant. They did not increase. Allocation for NREG, National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, that propels the non-farm jobs, has not increased. The allocation for National Social Assistance Program, which includes pensions, etc., did not increase. The food subsidies has come down by 7,000 crores. The fertilizer subsidies have gone down by 25,000 crores. And already the customs duty and the ammonium nitrate has increased. So therefore, the subsidies have come down. The customs duty and ammonium nitrate has increased. Certainly the fertilizer prices will rise. So tell me, so when you do not spend more on education, more on health, more on rural development, more on welfare, more on social assistance, more on food security, then where will you spend more? So that is the fundamental flaw in the economic strategy, and we saw through the budget.
So where did the money go?
Well, that's the question. The money has gone to reduce the fiscal deficit.
That's it.
The government is more keen to listen not to the World Bank and International Monetary Fund and other international financial institutions and the investors in stock market who do not want higher expenditure. So they are telling the government, reduce the expenditure, reduce the fiscal deficit. So, well, somebody may say, so why should you have spent more than you earn? So what is fiscal deficit? Fiscal deficit is essentially the gap between your income and spending. All right?
Right.
So the question comes is, why should the government spend more than its revenue? Well, any developing economy, any developing family will certainly do that. Suppose assuming that a parents have a monthly income of 20,000 and his or her their children got a seat in IIT and IIM. So their 20,000 salary will not make them afford such an education.
Right.
So what should they do? There are two ways. First option is not to send them to IIT and IIM. Tell them, beta, beti, I can't spend, you go and join BCom. The second option is, don't worry, beta, beti, we will take loans, we'll borrow, and we'll send you to IIT and IIM, and we will. Who is the right kind of parent? You tell me. Obviously, the second one. Obviously. Right. So we want the government to be the same. So government should also be like a responsible parent. So deficit financing is not a wrong concept. Unfortunately, the fiscal conservatives argue that deficit financing is bad for economy. But in any developing economy, whether it is a country, family, anything, it is always important that nothing wrong to borrow. But where will that borrowing go? The borrowing should go to expand the productive capacity, income generating capacity.
Right.
If it has to ensure the welfare of the family and society. So therefore, this government is still not ready to have a strategy of fiscal expansion wherein higher public investment will help. Well, certainly it has spent more on infrastructure. We'll come back to that later.
Sure.
But they are spending more on infrastructure. I appreciate that. But not on the overall fiscal expansion that will trigger and spur economic growth.